Welcome to this ramble video about astrology. And this time it's about historical and ancient texts decoded once and for all. Now, honestly, what inspired this portion of this video is I was rewatching, in full length, Cam White's The Delineation podcast, like his very first episode, where he was like, defend astrology. And he just went on like a full, over an hour long, ramble about how astrology deserves to be defended, and most people can't defend it. And this was like 4 years ago, but most people can't defend it. They stumble over to themselves, and they think that, when people confront them and say, oh, well, why are you dedicating your life to astrology when you should be working for someone else, etc., whatever the case may be, and critique to their career and their own lifestyle, they just don't know how to manage it. He then mentioned that he wants all of the astrology students and all of the astrologers in general to come up with research, detailed research and statistics in a historical and ancient text being decoded. The goal is to confront this. So this video is going to be hella long, but I don't really care because I have Saturn in my third house in Cancer, and if this video needs to be 3 hours or something, 4 hours, I'm here for it. I don't give a fuck how long it's going to take to upload this. I am going to talk about it. So let's talk about the archival turn in astrological studies. For centuries, and just so you know, I'm reading off of my computer right here, so nobody's confused. Ooh, you guys don't see that. So for centuries, the history of astrology was written by its detractors or by esoteric practitioners with little access to primary sources. The former dismissed it as superstition, and the latter romanticized it without textual bases. Both approaches obscured the actual historical development of one of humanity's most enduring intellectual traditions. The serious study of astrology's history began only in the mid-19th century, catalyzed by two parallel developments: the decipherment of cuneiform and the systemization of papyrology. For the first time, scholars could read what ancient astrologers actually wrote, rather than relying on second-hand accounts from church fathers or Renaissance compilers. What emerged was a picture far more complex and intellectually sophisticated than either detractors or romantics had imagined. This portion of this video, offers a rigorous decoding of the major primary sources that constitute the astrological tradition, from Mesopotamian celestial omens through Hellenistic manuals to medieval translations and Renaissance synthesis. It's designed for advanced students who seek not merely to practice astrology, but to understand its textual foundations, the very documents upon which the entire edifice rests. So we're starting with the Mesopotamian foundation, celestial omens, and the birth of horoscopy. So the Royal Library at Nineveh in the Enuma, Anu, Enlil tradition. The oldest astrological texts in existence are not horoscopes as we understand them, but celestial omen collections. The most significant of these is the series Enuma, Anu, Enlil, a vast compilation of some 70 tablets and 7,000 omens named for the gods of the sky and the earth. These tablets, many recovered from the Royal Library of Ashur-Bina by Nepal at Nineveh, 7th century BCE, represent the codification of observations stretching back to the Old Babylonian period, circa 1800 BCE. So the reports of the magicians and astrologers of Nineveh, published in modern edition by R. Campbell Thompson in 1900, provide our clearest window into how these omens were deployed in practice. These were not theoretical treatises, but working documents, reports sent to the king by his court scholars, interpreting celestial phenomena and advising on appropriate rituals. What distinguishes Mesopotamian celestial divination from later horoscopy is its collective political focus. The omens address the king and the nation, not the individual. A typical entry might read, "If the moon is surrounded by a halo and Jupiter stands within it, the king will conquer the land of his enemy." The individual's fate was not yet read from the stars. The revolutionary shift from public omens to private horoscopes. So the transition from celestial omen to birth horoscope represents one of the most significant conceptual shifts in intellectual history. Francesca Rochberg, the preeminent scholar of Babylonian astrology, has demonstrated that this shift occurred gradually in the first millennium BCE, reaching full development in the Persian and Hellenistic periods. The critical development was the application of omen logic to the moment of birth. If the gods placed signs in the sky for the king, why not also for the individual? The same hermeneutic, if X occurs in the sky, then Y will occur on Earth, was simply relocated from the collective to the personal. Recent scholarship, including a 2024 study of cuneiform technical terminology, has revealed that elements of horoscopic astrology, previously thought to have been invented by Greek astrologers, were actually developed by Babylonians. The terms DUR, interpreted as duration or period, and GU, referring to thread or connection, appear in late Babylonian astronomical texts in contexts that suggest the calculation of lifespans and planetary periods, the very techniques later systematized by Greek authors like Vitius Valens. Now, the earliest horoscopes. The oldest surviving horoscopes date to the 5th century BCE. They are terse, technical documents listing planetary positions without interpretation. A typical example gives the date of birth, often according to the Egyptian wandering calendar, even in cuneiform texts, the zodiacal positions of the 7 planets, and sometimes the rising sign. No analysis is included. That was presumably delivered orally or recorded in manuals, now lost. This format, raw data without interpretation, would persist for centuries. The earliest Greek horoscope on papyrus, dated paleographically to the late Ptolemaic or early Roman period, circa 29 BCE, follows exactly this pattern. Planetary positions listed by sign, the ascendant noted, but no accompanying analysis. The papyrus even uses abbreviations, GE for Gemini, VE for Venus, suggesting it was a practitioner's working note rather than a formal document. Now, part 2 is the Egyptian synthesis, demotic manuals and the Hellenistic fusion, the demotic astrological literature. Egypt played a crucial role in the transmission and transformation of Mesopotamian astral science. The conquest of Egypt by Alexander the Great in 332 BCE initiated a period of intense cultural exchange during which Babylonian celestial techniques were synthesized with Egyptian religious and philosophical traditions. The demotic astrological texts, written in the Egyptian script and language of the Ptolemaic and Roman periods, represent the synthesis in progress. P. Berlin, 8345, a demotic astrologer's manual from Sognopionesos and the Phaeon, I might have totally botched this, dates to the Roman period, but likely preserves material composed under the Ptolemies, 3rd through 1st century BCE, structured as a series of predictions organized by planet and zodiacal position, using red ink rubrication to mark new sections for easy reference by the practicing astrologer. The text format reveals the standardization of interpretive technique by the early Roman period. Each planet is treated systematically with predictions for its placement in each of the 12 places, being the houses. The underlying logic is consistent. Benefic planets, Venus, Jupiter, and favorable houses produce good outcomes. Malefic planets, Saturn, Mars, and unfavorable houses produce difficulties. A representative passage reads, "He who was born when Venus was in the house of misfortune, many bad rumors will spread about him in his youth. He will quarrel with a woman, but when he grows older, this will cease. He will then be happy with another woman." The prediction covers the entire lifespan, from youth through old age, a characteristic feature of mature Hellenistic astrology. The Nichipso Pittosiris. The Nichipso Pittosiris fragments. The most influential text of the Hellenistic Egyptian tradition survives only in fragments quoted by later authors. The Nichipso Osiris material, named for a legendary pharaoh and his priestly sage, was likely composed in Greek in the 2nd century BCE. It represents the first systematic attempt to synthesize Babylonian planetary lore with Egyptian religious concepts and Greek philosophical ideas. These fragments, collected and studied by modern scholars including Ernest Rhys and Wilhelm Gundel, preserve techniques that would become standard in later astrology. The calculation of the part of fortune, the system of planetary periods, chronocratories, and the interpretation of fixed stars. The work's attribution to ancient Egyptian authorities gave it immense prestige in the Hellenistic and Roman worlds, and it was cited with reverence by authors from Vitius Valens to Firmicus Maternis. Part 3 is the Hellenistic codification from manual to system, talking about the didactic poets, Anobian and Manetho. The technical material of the prose manuals was also rendered in verse, serving both mnemonic and aesthetic functions. Two poets stand out, Anubian and Manetho. So Anubian, probably a Theban Egyptian of the 2nd or 3rd century CE, wrote an astrological poem in elegiac distichs, alternating hexameter and pentameter lines. Fragments survive on papyrus, including P. Schubart 16, P. 7508, which preserves passages where the author speaks in the first person as the reader's guide through the complexities of astrological technique. The use of technical terminology, Kentrin, referring to the angular houses alongside poetic diction, reveals an audience of educated practitioners who expected literary polish as well as practical instruction. Manetho, the pseudonymous author of 6 books of astrological poetry, claimed the identity of the famous Egyptian historian of the 3rd century BCE, a transparent fiction that nonetheless signals the work's Egyptian pretensions. The Aptolesmatica, things relating to outcomes, survives complete and offers a systematic presentation of Hellenistic doctrine in Homeric hexameters. Take a sip of my drink really quick. So Vitius Valens and the anthologies. The most important single source for reconstructing Hellenistic astrological practice is the Astrologies. The most important single source for reconstructing Hellenistic astrological practice is the anthologies of Vitius Valens, an Antiochian astrologer who flourished in the mid-2nd century CE. Unlike the theoretical treatise of Ptolemy, Valens wrote for practitioners, preserving techniques, example charts, and even autobiographical details that illuminate the social world of the working astrologer. Valens' 9 books, the last discovered only in the 20th century in a manuscript from Mount Athos, document the full range of Hellenistic technique, the system of houses, planetary periods, lots, including the lot of fortune and the lot of spirit, and the complex methods of prediction known as ephesis, release, and zodion, annual phases. He includes dozens of example horoscopes, many of them his own clients, allowing modern scholars to test his techniques against historical data. Valens also preserves fragments of earlier authors whose works are otherwise lost, including Chrysodemus, Apollinaris, and the Nichipso Pito-Osiris tradition. His anthologies thus serves as both a practical manual and a repository of earlier astrological literature. Claudius Ptolemy and the Tetrabiblos. No survey of ancient astrological texts can omit Claudius Ptolemy, whose Tetrabiblos became the most influential astrological work in Western history, composed in the 2nd century CE as a companion to his astronomical Almagest. The Tetrabiblos, lit 4 books, attempted to place astrology on a rational philosophical foundation. Ptolemy's approach was Aristotelian and naturalistic. Celestial influences were physical effects of the planet's qualities: heat, moisture, dryness, cold on terrestrial matter. This framework allowed him to reject much of the more elaborate and, to his mind, superstitious apparatus of Hellenistic astrology while preserving its core principles. The Tetrabiblos is notable for its systematic organization. Book 1 covers general principles and the nature of the planets. Book 2 treats mundane astrology, nations, cities, weather. Book 3 addresses the specifics of natal charts, parents, siblings, length of life. Book 4 continues with career, marriage, children, and death. The structure became the template for countless later works. The Tetrabiblos survived in Greek manuscripts and was translated into Latin, Arabic, and Hebrew, ensuring its central place in both Islamic and European astrological traditions. Its authority was such that later astrologers often felt compelled to reconcile their techniques with Ptolemaic doctrine, even when their practice diverged significantly. The transmission through Islam, the Great Translation Movement. So we're talking about the Abbasid reception. So, the Islamic conquest of the 7th and 8th centuries brought the astrological traditions of Greece, Egypt, and Persia under a single political and linguistic umbrella. The Abbasid caliphs of Baghdad, particularly al-Mansur and al-Mamun, sponsored a massive translation project that rendered the major Greek scientific and philosophical works into Arabic. The astrological corpus translated in this period included Ptolemy's Tetrabiblos, known as al-Makalat, the works of Dorotheus of Sidon, a 1st century CE author whose Carmen Astrologicum survives only in Arabic translation, and the fragments of Vitius Valens and others. To these were added Persian works from the Sasanian tradition, particularly the Book of Nativities attributed to Zoroaster. The great names, Masha'Allah, Abu Mashar, and Al-Kindi. The translation movement was quickly followed by original composition in Arabic. Masha'Allah, a Persian Jew from Basra, wrote extensively on conjunctions, revolutions, and nativities. His works were translated into Latin in the 12th century and became foundational texts of medieval European astrology. Abu Mashar al-Balkhi was arguably the most influential astrologer of the Islamic world. His great introduction to astrology synthesized Aristotelian natural philosophy with Ptolemaic and Sasanian astrological doctrine, arguing for the rationality and philosophical respectability of the discipline. The work was translated into Latin by John of Seville in 1133 and into Greek, ironically given that much of it derived from Greek sources, in the 11th century, ensuring its circulation across the medieval world. Excuse me. So Abu Mashar's historical astrology, particularly his theory of Saturn-Jupiter conjunctions marking major historical epochs, influenced thinkers from Roger Bacon to Pierre d'Ailly and shaped medieval and Renaissance views of history. Al-Kindi, the philosopher of the Arabs, wrote numerous astrological treatises alongside his better-known philosophical works. His De Redis on rays, preserved only in Latin translation, developed a theory of astrological influence based on a universal network of rays connecting all things, a precursor to later theories of cosmic sympathy. Now let's talk about the Jewish contribution. Abraham ibn Ezra and the Hebrew synthesis. So I'll just say Ibn Ezra's astrological corpus. So Abraham ibn Ezra occupies a unique position in the history of astrology. He was around from circa 1089 through circa 1160. A Spanish Jewish poet, biblical commentator, and polymath, he wrote extensively on astrology during his wanderings through Italy, France, and England. His works are remarkable for their clarity, their reliance on Arabic sources, and their integration of astrological concepts into Jewish thought. So, Ibn Ezra's astrological writings include the Reshit Hokmah, Beginning of Wisdom, an introduction to astrology, the Sefer HaTamim, Book of Reasons, explaining the rationales behind astrological techniques, and the Sefer HaMoladot, Book of Nativities, on gene teleology. There we go. He also composed a series of works on specific techniques, Sefer HaMiorot on luminaries, Sefer HaShi'ilot on interrogations, and Sefer HaOlam on world astrology. The Liber Abraham Audi de Nativa Taitibis. One of the most intriguing texts in the Ibn Ezra corpus is the Liber Abraham Udi de, the Book of Nativities by Abraham the Jew, a Latin work whose relationship to Ibn Ezra has long puzzled scholars. The first printed edition, Venice, 1485, gives 1154 as the date of composition, leading some to suggest that Ibn Ezra wrote it directly in Latin for a European audience. Recent manuscript research by Shlomo Sila has transformed our understanding of this text, examining virtually all available manuscript witnesses. Sila demonstrates that the archetype was written in Hebrew by Ibn Ezra, that the Latin version was composed in 1166 after Ibn Ezra's death, and that it circulated in 4 distinct recensions. One of these recensions was the work of Henry Bate of Mechlin, 1246 after 1310, who translated a collection of Ibn Ezra's astrological writings into Latin. So this case study illustrates the complexity of the textual tradition. A Hebrew original composed in the 1150s was translated into Latin after the author's death, revised by multiple hands, and eventually printed in a form that obscures its origins. Only through painstaking manuscript work can we recover the actual history. Let's talk about the Latin Middle Ages, translation, adaptation, and innovation. The 12th century Renaissance. The 12th century witnessed a flood of translations from Arabic into Latin, centered in Spain, particularly Toledo and Italy. Astrological works were prominent among them as European scholars sought access to the full range of Greco-Arabic science. John of Seville, 1133 through 1153, translated Abu Mashar's Great Introduction, Masha Allah's works, and numerous other texts. Gerard of Cremona, 1114 through 1187, worked in Toledo, translated Ptolemy's Tetrabiblos from Arabic, not Greek, along with astronomical and astrological works by Al-Farghani, Al-Batani, and others. These translations made the full corpus of Islamic astrology available to Latin readers for the first time. Guido Bonatti and the Liber Astronomicus. Just making sure I have something in my water bottle. That was low-key embarrassing. Alright. But fuck getting embarrassed. Guido Bonatti, circa 1210 through circa 1296, possibly the most important astrologer of the Latin Middle Ages, synthesized this translated tradition into a massive encyclopedic work, the Liber Astronomicus. Bonatti was a practicing astrologer of considerable reputation. Dante placed him in hell among the diviners, a testament to his fame, and his book reflects both textual learning and practical experience. Recent scholarship has emphasized Bonatti's originality within the received tradition. He was not merely a compiler, but a systematizer who amended and expanded his sources based on his own practice. Close textual analysis reveals where he innovated, where he clarified ambiguous passages, and where he synthesized conflicting authorities. This combination of textual inheritance and practical experience makes the Liber Astronomicus an invaluable witness to medieval astrological practice. Bonatti's work is encyclopedic in scope, covering nativities, interrogations, elections, and mundane astrology. It was printed in 1491, Augsburg, and again in 1550, Basel, and remained a standard textbook for centuries. Alright, let's talk about comparative traditions, the Chinese evidence. So, astrology developed independently in China, though with intriguing parallels to the Western tradition. The excavation of the Shui Hudi tombs in Hubei province in 1975 revealed a cache of bamboo texts from the Qin dynasty, 221 through 206 BCE, including several day books, Raishu, that document popular divinatory practice. The stars, Xing, text from Shui Hudi, correlates to 28 lunar lodges, Zhu, with predictions for daily life. A typical entry reads, when the moon's is in Horn, the first lodge, children born will become rich. One may not go east. Taking a wife will cause the wife to become poor. The structure is remarkably similar to contemporary Hellenistic material. Celestial position yields terrestrial outcome. The comparative study of these daybooks with Western astrological texts reveals both parallels and divergences. Both traditions organized the sky into discrete divisions, 28 lodges in China, 12 signs in the West, and correlated them with human affairs, but the Chinese system remained focused on daily life, marriage, childbirth, travel, rather than the individualized fate of Hellenistic horoscopy. It also integrated more thoroughly with other divinatory systems, topomancy, numerology, that remained separate in the West. Methodological principles for reading ancient astrological texts. All right. No ancient astrological text survives in its original form. Unfortunately, we work with copies of copies, each generation introducing errors, omissions, and interpolations. The Nichepso, Pito, Cyrus fragments are quotations in later authors. The Tetrabiblos survives in dozens of manuscripts with significant variants. The Arabic translations often preserve readings lost in the Greek tradition. The advanced student must cultivate a critical approach to textual evidence. When a medieval Latin text cites Abu Mashar, which version of Abu Mashar is being used? Is it quoting directly or through an intermediary? Does the Latin translation accurately render the Arabic, or has it been adapted for European readers? These questions are not mere pedantry. They affect our understanding of what ancient astrologers actually believed and practiced. Okay? We're getting into quite a bit here, and I'm very excited to have you guys. So let's distinguish theory from practice. Another methodological challenge lies in distinguishing theoretical prescription from actual practice. Astrological manuals prescribe techniques, but did astrologers actually use them? The horoscopes preserved on papyrus and in literary sources provide a check. When Vidius Valens describes a complex system of planetary periods, we can test it against the example charts he provides. When Firmicus Maternus recommends certain techniques, we can ask whether they appear in contemporary horoscopes. The match is often imperfect, suggesting that manuals represent ideals rather than descriptions of practice, or that different astrologers favored different techniques. The search for origins. Oops, wait a minute. Kind of skipped over. I'm on my computer. It's going really slow. Alright, there it is. The search for origins has driven much scholarship on ancient astrology, often with nationalistic or ideological undertones. Did astrology begin in Babylon or Egypt? Were the Greeks innovators or mere transmitters? Such questions are increasingly recognized as oversimplified. The evidence points to a complex multidirectional exchange. Babylonian techniques were adopted and adapted by Egyptians and Greeks. Egyptian religious concepts shaped Hellenistic interpretations. Greek philosophical frameworks gave astrology intellectual respectability. Persian and Indian traditions contributed their own elements. By the Roman period, astrology was a genuinely international discipline, drawing on multiple cultural streams. The study of ancient astrological texts is not holy shit. Antiquarianism. Holy shit. I haven't said that word in a very long time. The study of ancient astrological texts is not antiquarianism. Awesome. The techniques preserved in these documents remain the foundation of traditional astrological practice. When a modern astrologer calculates the part of fortune, they are using a method first attested in the Nichepso Pito Cyrus fragments. When they interpret a planet in the 10th house, they draw on a system codified in Hellenistic manuals and transmitted through Arabic and Latin translations. But access to these techniques requires more than translation. It requires understanding the conceptual world in which they developed. The ancient astrologer did not think in terms of psychological archetypes or synchronicity. They thought in terms of celestial influence, cosmic sympathy, and divine communication. Their techniques were designed to work within that framework. For the advanced student, The goal is not to choose between ancient and modern approaches, but to understand both deeply enough to synthesize them. The ancient texts preserve techniques that modern astrology has lost or forgotten. Modern psychology offers frameworks for understanding how those techniques work on the human psyche. The integration of these perspectives is the work of a lifetime, and it begins with reading the texts themselves. So right now I'll give you my appendix, major primary sources by period. So Mesopotamian, Enuma, Anu, and Lil, Celestial Omen series, the reports of the magicians and astrologers of Nineveh, late Babylonian horoscopes, cuneiform, Hellenistic Egyptian, circa 300 BCE, 200 CE, Egypto-Ptolemy fragments, Demotic astrological manuals, Greek papyrus horoscopes, Hellenistic Roman, Dorotheus of Sidon, Carmen Astrologicum, Vitius Valens anthologies, Claudius Ptolemy, Tetrabiblos, Manetho Apotelesmatica, Anubian astrological poem, Firmicus Maternus Mathesis. Okay. Islamic, Masha'Allah, various works, Abu Mashar, Great Introduction, Al-Kindi de Radis, Latin translation, Al-Biruni, Element of Astrology, Jewish, Abraham ibn Ezra, and Liber Abraham Ludi de Nativitatibus. Latin Medieval, John of Seville translations, Gerard of Cremona translations, Guido Bonatti, Liber Astronomicus. Chinese, there's the Shui Hudi Keen Daybooks and Kong Jayapo Han Daybooks. Alright. So yeah, the texts discussed in this video are not relics to be venerated, but tools to be used, and like any tools, they reveal their full potential only to those who understand their design. Just like DeepSeek AI. Thank you for watching this video. Subscribe, like, and comment. And I'll be teaching you more advanced astrology. With peace and love. Piscean out.